Rabbi Shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Dear brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum. We have been talking about the Islam, a comprehensive introduction, a book by Javed Ahmad Ghamdi, and we have thus far discussed many things. We have discussed, for example, where do we get our religion from? What are the fundamental sources based on Quran that we get our religion from? And then after that we talked about a very important thing, which was that the Quran was sent in the Arabic language, which was there 1500 years ago. So that language was spoken 1500 years ago, and we do not speak that language today. So when we are talking about the interpretation of the Quran, we have to be very careful that we do not that we understand Quran in the language that was 1500 years ago and not that of today. So in that regards, I was going to give you some example. So in this regards, we were now discussing the practical examples from Quran to be able to understand this, because I made this claim, or the author of the book makes this claim, that the language spoken 1500 years ago is not the same as the language spoken today in some respects. In a lot of respect it is, but it is in some respects not the same book. So how are we going to then validate that claim? To validate that claim, we have to look at some examples. And before that, one question we raised was, where are we going to find that language, the sample of that language? We said we're going to first find it in the Quran, then we're going to find it in the literature that was printed at that time. So the poetry of that time, 1500 years ago, whatever poetry was there. And then after that, the akhbar-e-ahad, which was the ahadith and asar. Okay, so we talked about that, and in this regard, the first ayah we discussed was this ayah, هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب. The word kitab, for example, has been used in more than just the meaning of the book. It's not just book, what it means. It also means the law. It also means letter, for example. So in the specific context that the sentence comes, you have to then interpret it as such. Then I'll fast forward to the next one, which was Surah Balad. And I had said at that point in time that the meaning of this ayah, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ, khalaqna is used in a way that is no longer used today. Even in the Arabic language, it is no longer used today. So, La uqsimu bihazal balad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I swear by this city. What city? Makkah, city of Makkah. Wa anta hillum bihazal balad, O Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you live in this city. Wa walidin wa ma walad, and I swear by the father and his son. Who is this father and his son? This is referring to Ibrahim alayhi salam. I just left the conventional translation there just so that we can make our point. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. This insan we are talking about here is not all human beings. This is specifically referring to Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam, who when started the city of Makkah, they were in a lot of turmoil. They were in a lot of trial. That's what that meant. Okay, so this, I created a city, or I created a nation. That's no longer used in any language that way. We do not use that. So that's what we tried to explain last time. You're welcome to review our podcast or our YouTube list for more information on this, inshallah. So we talked about that. Then we talked about Surah Teen, and similarly, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We talked about the fact that وَالتِّينِ وَالزَّيْتُونِ, Teen وَالزَّيْتُونِ refers to the genesis of the Christians. وَطُورِ سِينِينَ is the genesis of Bani Israel, and وَهَذَا الْبَلَدِ الْأَمِينَ is the genesis of Bani Ismail. When Ibrahim alayhi salam and his son Ismail alayhi salam were the founders of the city of Makkah. And Allah is saying, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. When these people lived in these times, in the beginning, they were the best of them. And as time went by, they deteriorated in their morality. So going on further then, we talked about another example. We said that in Old Arabic, if you want to say, ana afal, which would mean I am doing it. which means I'm doing it. In old Arabic, we'll get to there, but let's say today you want to say I'm doing it, and Zayan says I'm definitely going to do it. Like his mom has been nagging him, you need to do the dishes, you need to do the dishes, and he says finally, yeah, I'm definitely going to do it. So what is he going to say? In today's Arabic, he is saying La budda nafal, I'll definitely do it. But that's not how you will speak in the Arabic 1500 years ago. What will you say? You will just actually make the verb as the object. And so you will say inni fa'il. Okay, so you will actually make it a subject. I am the doer. When you just say I am the doer, in essence you are saying I will definitely do it. That's a very different way of speaking, isn't it? We don't speak that way, even in Arabic today. So the construction of the clause of the sentence, it then conveys the meaning of definitely without using the word definitely. Okay, so that's where we left, and we then discussed this example that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wallahu mutimmu nurihi. So where's the word mutimmu definitely in this? You know, because he used the verb, used the verb and he put it in the subject form. That's what conveys that meaning of definitely. I'll definitely do it. You know, even if people, disbelievers, do not like it. So that's what we had discussed so far. Then we had talked about the fact that in verbs in Arabic, it goes through many stages. And if it is clear to the audience, what that meaning is or what stage it is in, it does not explain it. Quran does not explain itself. Okay? So Allah, for example, says, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. Everybody has heard this ayah, right? Everybody has heard this ayah. At least all Muslims. Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. If you were to conventionally translate it, what would it be? We descended, or we sent down this Quran in Laylatul Qadr. That's what you have heard all your life. All your life you have heard this. But it actually means we started to send this Quran in the night of glory, in Laylatul Qadr. Okay? And that started to is implied and understood by the audience. 1500 years ago, the Quraysh used to, when they would listen to this sentence, they would automatically understand that, oh yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about, oh, he started to. It's very different than our current language, isn't it? So this is slide 38, I'm going to go to another slide and just make a very quick point here, and then we're going to come back to that point, inshallah. In the old languages, whether that be Arabic, whether that be Sanskrit or Aramaic, Ibrani, all of those languages, they operated on a very important idea. They operated on the idea that I would use the least amount of words to get my message across to you. Because if I started to explain myself to you in a lot of words, I am insulting your intelligence. That was the idea. That was the philosophy in that language. Okay, in all of those languages. I will talk to you, respecting you that your IQ is like 150, all right, or 140, and then I'll talk to you and I will assume that you will understand what I'm saying. And I would not necessarily expand too much on my thing. That's not the psychology with which we speak these days. These days when we speak and we talk about a lot of different situations. If this were to happen, then this will do it. And we always give a lot of context to what we are trying to say, right? All of our sentences have lots of ifs and buts and ands and other things. That's not how the old language was. The old language did not have this psychology. So let's go back to our other slide, which was Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not need to, because he was speaking directly to that people, right? He did not need to say that I started to send this Quran in Arabic. You didn't need to say that. He didn't need to say that. He just said Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. But if you look at any tafsir, if you look at any, then because of not understanding this, then you have to think about, oh, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the whole Quran in Arabic, we know Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam historically did not have the whole Quran, although the Quraysh and other people requested for it. They said, you keep coming up with these small little few ayahs here and there. Why didn't you just get us all the Quran all at once? And Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually talked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about it. He said, through Angel Gabriel, I was like, can you just give me the whole thing right at once? And that'll be easy for me because they keep asking about this. And so he was told, no, you can't have that. And so inna anzalnahu, then the explanation we came up with this, it was descended to the first heaven. And then from first heaven we started to get it as the time needed. Whatever the need of the time was, we got more and more of those ayahs of the Quran from that source at the first heaven. Why did we need to come up with that explanation? Because inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr, if you don't understand that we started to descend Quran is already meant in the word anzalnahu. If we don't understand that, then we won't understand the meaning of this one. Okay? Ya ayyuhallazina amanu. Aminu. Oh, who believe. What does that mean? Perfect your belief. Improve your belief. One would think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, oh, people who believe. What does that mean? If I am a believer, you're calling me a believer, and then you're saying believe, that doesn't make any sense. Right? Oh, you human, become human. What does that mean? What does that mean? What it means here is that aminu, perfect your belief. Improve your belief. Does that make sense? All right. And then the final thing, Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, qala inni abdullahi atani al-kitab wajalni nabiya. Prophet Isa alayhi salam, in the cradle of his mother, he's there and he's talking to people. And what is he saying? He's saying, inni Abdullah, I am the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Atani al-kitab, he has given me the book. Wajalni nabiya, and he has made me a prophet. But he's a child. When was he given the book? He's a child. He's just born. He's talking to people. That's a miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has not yet been given the book. He has not yet been made the prophet. Correct? Does it make sense? All right. So when Allah uses this word atani, which is the verb, and it is used 1500 years ago, you will then say he has destined me to become. It has the futuristic implication in it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make me. He has destined to make me the prophet. He has destined to give me the book. Does that make sense? So I've given you 3 examples. One from the past, one from the present, and one from the future. Just so that you can understand the different meanings of the verb. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not explain it. Not explain it. Oh, it's about the future. It's not. Why wouldn't he explain it? Because if he has to explain it, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not speaking the language of those people, those audience. And then those people would say, you're not even talking about our language. This is not how we speak. What are you talking about? Right? So it has grammatical mistakes in it. It has syntextual mistakes in it. Does it make sense? All right. So we talked about that. Then let's another very important difference in that language is wow. The word wow, and, right? It means and, the harf, right? The harf wow. And we discovered in our source discussion that wow does not always mean and. And it leads to some very sophisticated, very tough problems if you do not understand that. If you do not understand that, it results in a lot of problem. For example, in this ayah, this was our source. You should have memorized it by now because we have just talked about this so much. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته. It is Allah who has sent amongst the unlettered a prophet. What does he do? He recites amongst them, recite to them ayahs that have been sent on them. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and he thus thus He purifies them. Otherwise, if you translate it, you would say, He recites ayahs onto them, He purifies them, and He teaches them the book, and He teaches them the hikmah. And if you reviewed our previous lectures about this topic, you would understand, because we talked about what other different meanings people understood from it and what kind of chaos it created in our history, that it was just simply because we did not understand the word wow, and we didn't apply the correct meaning in a correct place. And we're going to look at some other examples. For example, قَدْ جَاءَكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ نُورٌ وَكِتَابٌ مُبِينٌ. Right? What is Allah saying? قَدْ جَاءَكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ نُورٌ. There certainly has come to you, min Allah, from Allah, nur, wa kitabun munir. If you translated and, what would you say? You would say, certainly have come to you nur from Allah and a clear book. Correct? That would be the meaning that you will come up to, right? Based on the and definition. But what's the next part of this? The next ayah is Yahdi bihillahu. Allah uses the preposition bihi. Preposition bihi is used for singular. Preposition bihi is not used for plural. You would have expected, if these were two things, Allah would have said Yahdi bihimullahu. With these two things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you guidance or whatnot. Alright? Does that make sense? So the later portion of the sentence has explained to you that Nur and Kitabul Min are the same thing, and hence you will translate wow here as that is. There certainly has come to you from Allah a light that is a clear book. What is that light? That light is the clear book. It's not something separate from the book. Does that make sense? Okay, so we talked about that. Allahu allazi anzal al-kitaba bil-haqqi wal-mizan. We also talked about وَإِذْ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ وَالْفُرْقَانَ. We have talked about these examples a lot before, so I'm not going to go into the detail of this. So wow does not just mean and. It can be used for thus, it can be used for therefore, it can be used for so, and we have and so there's lots of examples. So let me just kind of, to drill this point home, I want to tell you this example, which we already did. Kama arsalna fikum rasulam minkum. Just like we sent amongst you the prophets, yatlu alaykum ayatina. They would recite unto you our ayahs, wa yuzakkihim, and thus they would purify you, wa yuallimuhumul kitaba wal hikmah, and they would teach you kitab, and they would teach you hikmah, wa yuallimukum ma lam takunu ta'lamun, and they will teach you what you did not know. So if you just translate it as and, you would say, oh, what does Prophet come from? Prophet come because he purifies you, because he teaches you the book. What is the book? Quran, right? That's the conventional thing. We corrected that. That's not the correct translation here. وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ الْكِتَابُ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, and he teaches you hikmah. وَيُعَلِّمُكُم مَا لَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْمَلُونَ, and in addition, he teaches you everything. And so then we talked about there is a sect, or there's a portion of people who actually believe that Prophet ﷺ, for example, know everything in the heaven and the earth. Everything. Why? Because Allah taught him. And why did that confusion arise? Because we did not translate the harf wow correctly here. So here the correct translation would be وَيُعَلِّمُكُم مَا لَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْمَلُونَ, and thus he taught you what you did not know. By teaching you the hikmah, by teaching you kitab, he taught you what you didn't know. Simple thing can result in massive misunderstanding. Massive misunderstanding because of how we in 2021 or how we in 930, etc. are looking at this literature. Not because the original audience had any confusion about this. They didn't. Okay, all right, so let's move on. Now you may say, well, so what? Fine, it's good, it's great, it may result in some belief issues. Does it really result in any problems in your life and my life? Does it result in any practical issues? And the answer is absolutely it does. It results in massive issues. I'll show you this example. This is ayah from Surah An-Nisa. This is the 4th surah, and this is the 11th ayah, and I'll recommend highly all of you go back home and study this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Yusikumullahu fi awladikum lizzakari mislu hazil unsayn. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding you in regards to your children, that it about inheritance, that the share of a male is twice that of a female. Okay. فَإِن كُنَّ نِسَاءً فَوْقَ اثْنَتَيْنِ فَلَهُنَّ ثُلُثُ مَا تَرَكَ. If you leave 2 or more females, their share is 2/3 of the estate. وَإِن كَانَتْ وَاحِدَةً فَلَهَا النِّصْفُ. And if you have one daughter, then her share is going to be half. And then he says, wa, the same wow that's coming. وَلِأَبُوَيْهِ لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا السُّدُسُ. And for each of the parent is 1/6. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that a boy is going to get twice as much as the girl. And then he's saying that both the parents, I'm going to skip in the middle, we're going to come back to it. He's saying that both the parents are going to get 1/6. So if you combine 1/6 to 1/6, what is it? Nani, what is it? 1/3. Thank you very much. So let's say you have a son and you have a daughter, and then you have parents. Based on this ayah of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and I'm just translating it explaining it based on the conventional translation, the traditional translation. There will be, if you have a son and a daughter and you have parents, you will give the son how much? لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنثَيَيْنِ. The son is going to get 2/3. Correct? Son is going to get 2/3. And how much is the daughter going to get? 1/3. Because the son has twice, you'll get twice as much as the daughter. And then he says, وَلِيَبْوَيْهِ لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا السُّدُسُ. And both the parents are going to get 1/3. How are they going to get 1/3? When you add the fractions, 2/3 plus 1/3 is already a whole. So where is that 1/3 coming from for both the mom and the dad? This was the genesis of the problem, which actually resulted in this new line of thinking, by the way, this particular ayah, because it resulted in a lot of problems. Why is it resulting in a problem? Because somebody is going to have to be deprived of their inheritance share. Somebody is going to will not receive their proper share based on this taqseem. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is reported. He is reported. When I focus on this word reported, I want to focus on this because these akhbar-e-ahad, these isolated reports have reached us in the 2nd century. In the 2nd century, now people are saying 6th, 8th, and 10th generation have passed on. And now people are saying Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu did this. Okay? And so what did he do? He was presented with this thing. Before I tell you what he did, let me give you this example. We are saying that I give you a box of candy. I give you a box of candy, okay? And it's for your family. It's for your children. But if your father is there, give him a piece of candy from it. Does that make sense? If your father is there, give him a piece of candy from there. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is reported to have faced this situation when he was the Khalifa. And people are coming to him and he's saying, what do we do now? How are we going to separate this inheritance between all of us? So he came up with a solution. And the solution was, you obviously 2 by 3, 1 plus 1 by 3 plus 1 by 3 is not a whole, correct? It's not 1. So why don't we just take a square root of the whole thing? We take a square root of 2 by 3, we take a square root of 1 by 3, and we take a square root of 1 by 3 again. And that's how then we will give everybody from the 1 share. Does it make sense? This is called the law of owl. It's a big thing in the law of inheritance. Because of the inability to understand this simple word, harf, wow, this problem was created. And I'll just tell you a funny incident which is reported to have been said by Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who is a famous Sahabi. He was talking to his pupil while all of this commotion was happening, where he heard that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is reported to have said this. So he said, people say that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu passed this ruling of all, but what I don't understand is that the Creator, who knows how many sand particles are there in the world, he cannot 2 by 3 plus 1 by 3 plus 1 by 3. So it kind of created quite a funny situation, isn't it? It's like you would want the creator of Allah, creator of the universe, to be able to very easily do that math. And he never said in those ayah, if you read this ayah, there's no mention that you must take a square root of it. Right? There's no implication of that either. So the meaning of this wow is not and. The meaning of this wow is if. It's called istidrak. So the meaning here is what I just told you. Was like, I give you a box of candy, take it to your family, this is for your children, give 2/3 to your son, give 1/3 to your daughter, and if your father is there, then give him a piece of candy. Or give him 1/3 from it. So what you're supposed to do? First you're supposed to give your father his 1/3. Whatever remains out of that, you're supposed to give 2/3 to the son and 1/3 to the daughter. Does that make sense? And this is clear history. You can read up about this, the inheritance laws and all the things, and what has happened to this ayah. All the inheritance laws are based on the Surah Nisa ayahs. So I hope this drives home the point of how serious of an issue this is. Yes?
So how did Quraysh understood that? Like this was supposed to be for them. This is supposed to be the Musalman, the Mubin. So why did they were mistaken? Why was Hazrat Umar mistaken? Why did he?
That's an excellent question. Brother Hassan is asking, why was Quraysh mistaken about this? Why did they not understand? Remember, we said it's in the Lisan al-Mubin, Quran is in the Lisan al-Mubin. We have no evidence that they did not understand it correctly. We are reading about these akhbar-e-ahad in the 2nd century. That they did this. Right. So there's a lot of questions. There could be a lot of questions of how they may have understood it. We don't know. It's possible that Hazrat Umar himself may not have understood it. There's a lot of possibilities. We just do not know. But what we know is we have the literature in front of us, which is the Quran. When we look at it, we will then try to understand that ayah based on that. That's why we say that Quran would be the premier source for our understanding.
The question arises is that this is the explanation came like 14 centuries later when Ramli Sahab came up with this, that this is the meaning of wow, it should be if not. But like for 14 centuries, people were deriving the same rule based on the whole that that's what it means, and that's what it was called. My question with that is that people who were supposed to be the first audience of this Quran, why were not they able to understand it correctly?
First of all, again, I'm going to reiterate myself. I'm going to say that we have no evidence that they did not understand it correctly. Point number one. Just because there is a ruling that exists, and it is said to have been done by Umar, does not mean that he actually did it. That's a very important point, right? Because all of these are isolated reports. Point number one. Point number two is that this is a matter of research. This thing is a matter of research on the Quranic language. And unless you do that, you may not be able to find the answer. And it has nothing to do with how people understood it in the beginning. It has nothing to do with it. Why does it have nothing to do with it? It has nothing to do with it because people at one certain point in time can all agree on the wrong meaning. Right? People at certain point in time, they said that the earth was stationary and the sun was going around it. Well, a lot of evidence, right, on that end, and then we disregarded all of that. So beyond that, I cannot explain your answer, and we can talk about this, and we can do some more research on this.
The other advantage is this makes more sense. And the Quran isn't like necessarily super complicated. the complications that we found in religion, like socks and all, are not things that we find in Islam. This is a more secular perspective that makes sense when you're instructing, millions of people. Versus when you get to the square root of x and the law, like there's a reason why it's so complex. So that is almost more compelling in itself as an argument that makes sense to me. Because I can't imagine that it would be a more complex instruction when you're instructing.
Exactly. So Sarah said that this makes sense. This explanation is simpler, it makes sense, and it solves a problem. It solves a problem, and it also explains the ayahs of the Quran, which were a total mystery until before this. His question is, how did the people in the beginning understood this? So please remember that we don't know that. It's very tough to actually get to the bottom of that, because when you say, let's say you say, 10 Sahaba understood it this way. Well, somebody may have heard them, and maybe they were famous and they reported it. But it is possible that nobody have reported any understanding from the hundreds of other Sahabas. And because of its transmission, because it is not been transmitted through consensus and perpetuality, that's why we just don't know how they understood it. That's the problem. And in this particular thing, it is reported that Umar Radhiyallahu Ta'ala anhu did this. We don't know that. We don't know that. There's issues with that transmission. These are both fantastic questions. Thank you for asking that. But what are we liable for? Are we liable for looking at the Quran, which has been given to us through perpetuality and consensus? We are going to look at it at the lens of a very weak resource given to us in the shape of isolated reports, stories and whatnot, which was said to have been reported from these people, or we are going to look at the source, the proper source. So, Imam Bukhari, for example, in his introduction of his book, and many others have said that if you find something in the Quran which is against my understanding of whatever I have reported, please throw away my whatever you find here, which is against it. So you have to keep Quran on top. You should look at these other resources, these akhbar-e-ahad, and you should try to understand them. You should try to reconcile them. But remember, the person who is reporting to you is not the court, the typist in the court. He's not doing the best verbatim job. This is also not written. It has been passed on verbally from one generation to another with some modifications possibly, and after a long period of time somebody wrote them down when it became history. So it's very tough to answer that question, but to her point, Sarah's point, it makes tremendous sense, and it solves a very old problem for us. This problem has been there for a long period of time. I hope that answers the question. And to your question, I cannot say how did they understood it. Thank you. Any other questions? Those are great questions. All right. So let's see how much time we have. So I'll just take 5-7 more minutes. Let's talk about another issue. How does Quran ask question? This is another category of things which is very different in today's Arabic versus the Arabic that was 1500 years ago. So for example, in Surah Baqarah, there is this ayah which says, Yas'alunaka anil ahilla. Yas'alunaka, they ask you, anil ahilla, about ahilla. What is ahilla? Ahilla is the new moon. Okay, the new moon, hilal. It comes from the word hilal. And the plural of that is ahilla. Okay, so the plural of that is ahilla. So if you are going to commonly translate it, you are going to say, they ask you about the new moons. The new moons, right? Ahilla. But the question is, what does that mean? What are they asking about the new moons? Is it a religious question? What does it have to do with the religion? What does it have to do with the religion? Right? Yas'alunaka anil ahilla. So, because that didn't make sense, then what did Mufassirin do? They said, maybe what that means is that they were asking about the different stages of the moon. Well, it becomes full and 14th, and it becomes Very little in the end and in the very beginning, correct? Right? That's what it means. So maybe that's what it means. Maybe that's what they were trying to ask about. And let me tell you the meaning, first of all, and then you will understand how Quran asks question. So in Quran, as we said in the philosophy of the old languages, they will talk or they will say minimum things, and if the answer of the question, the answer of the full question is in the answer embedded in the answer, then I will not tell you the whole question. Okay? So for example, let me tell you these examples. These days, this is how we talk. We say, she asked me that when the pot starts to boil, then I should put the beans in the water. Okay? This is how we talk these days, right? But in old days, that's not how they would say. They would say, she asked me about the boiling water. Well, then when you say, what do I do with the boiling water? You will understand the question of what the boiling water is about based on the answer. You would review the answer, that will tell you what is the meaning of the question. Does that make sense? You will understand the question based on the answer. So for example, yas'alunaka ahilla, and this is common in our languages as well. For example, in Urdu, we say, aaj chand ki kya tarikh hai? Right? When you say that, what is the moon day today? Well, that is a really bad English translation. You're not referring to the moon, are you? You are talking about the day of the month. You are talking about the day of the month. And when you say, yas'alunaka ahilla, what they are basically talking about, yas'alunaka, they ask you about al. Whenever you put al onto something, it makes it specific, da, right? Da book versus a book. Ahilla is the plural of the new moon. So what they are trying to basically ask about is, they are asking about the sacred months, the specific months of the year. Okay? They are asking about the months. Any months? No, the months. They are asking about the months. Which months? Why were they talking about? Read the rest of the ayah. Kul hiya mawaqitu lin-nasi wal hajj. The answers explain that there are means, these specific months are means for people to get whatever is in their interest, to do those trades and determine the dates for traveling, etc., etc., as well as Hajj. In those months, the sacred months, people will do Hajj. That answer tells you what the question was. The question is, yasalunaka anil ahilla. If you don't understand this style in the old Arabic, if you don't understand, then you will be like, oh, they were talking about the rise and the set of the sun or of the moon, or what were they talking about? We don't understand the question. So in those days, people talk like this. Okay? So they wouldn't say, yasalunaka, they are asking about only the haram months or anything. That was not the style of spoken that. And remember, Quran was sent in that language, so it has to comply with that style. It has to comply with that style 100%. So that is one example. Then, yasalunaka maza yunfikun. They're asking about what to spend. Well, what context? Do you have a lot of money? Are you talking about you should take it out from your savings? What are you talking about? The answer will tell you. The answer will tell you what the question is. Does that make sense? Does that okay? All right, I'm going to leave it here. Next time, inshallah, we're going to talk about how do you determine time in a nominal sentence. There are a verbal sentence, and then there's a verbal sentence and a nominal sentence, right, Turhan? So verbal sentence is he goes, I go, I eat, you eat, she eats. And then there's nominal sentences. This is a book. This is a gift, etc. And there is no time in a nominal sentence, is it? There is no time. This is a book. What are you talking about? Are you talking about, at least in Arabic, there is no time? And we're gonna discuss that theory a little bit first, and then we're going to talk about various other differences between the previous Arabic and today's Arabic, inshallah, to drive home this point. I'm just trying to explain to you with examples of the differences in the Arab language, try to drive home the point that this is slightly different language than what was before. And so when you are trying to understand Quran in today's Arabic, you're going to have some issues. If you decided to go to some scholar and then you said, or to Medina University and say, oh, I'm going to learn today's Arabic and I'm going to watch all their sitcoms and I'm going to read their newspaper and then I'm going to be terrific at writing a tafsir of Quran, well, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have trouble. Jazakallahu khair for your attention. Any questions? Sorry.
So I think one of the comments I think you mentioned a few weeks back that, the vocabulary was, if you think the vocabulary in Arabic language now and that time, is considerably fewer. And so they use the same word in different contexts. And that might raise some of these, So it's not really what you call confusion, it's just, that was the context.
The thing is that the vocabulary used in that time was not too different though. For example, if we used a different word back then for book popularly, in popular culture, you go in 6th century Arabia and you're asking somebody for a book. And if you had to use a different word than kitab, then yes, your point is correct. Then you would say, oh, they used a different word back then, and now we use the word kitab, so that's, the vocabulary has changed. That's not true. Quranic vocabulary still exists in the same way that it used to exist in 6th century, but the construction of the sentence has changed a lot. And that's what we're discussing. We're discussing the construction, and first we discussed, like, now we used one proper noun for one or two things, or one word for one concept, like kitab. These days, if I ask you, give me a book, or in English, for example, or kitab, you're never going to give me legislation. You're not going to give me a letter. But that was not the idea back then, because there were not too many other words. They will use the same word in different shades, and it is up to the listener to understand it. Similarly, the word wow here, the harf wow. Does it make sense? So it's all about the construction, and we're trying to understand what that construction means. Jazakallah khair. Any other question? Thank you so much.